Hailing from the Jersey Shore and raised as athletes, the Airey Bros have always shared a passion for physical culture, athletic performance, and human optimization, always striving to be the strongest versions of themselves, mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. Along the way, they've met some pretty amazing humans and have had some pretty epic adventures. The intention of Airey Bros Radio is to showcase these amazing people and the impact that they've had on them, and to share tips, tricks, and hacks so that you can win each day, every day.
You're listening to Airey Bros Radio. Be there or be square, because it's all killer, no filler.
Building the Friedman Wrestling Center did more for college wrestling than almost anything that we could have possibly have done. It made it acceptable to spend money on our sport, and all my coaches, my peers, better be thanking me for these big raises they've got, because now they're paying more to keep the coaches. One of my assistants was mad at me one time. He goes, "You run the program like it's a business, and you can't run a wrestling program like." I'm like, you know what? That was the biggest compliment I've ever been given. There are certain things I train more than perhaps other schools, and I think it's paid dividends. We've got palm trees and we've got sun, which is a huge advantage. Just because I coached 32 years doesn't mean I'm old. I did start at Cornell when I was 12, so that makes me, I'm 44. This is Rob Koll, and you're listening to Airey Bros Radio. There's 25,000 people in town. There's 100,000 in the entire county, and it takes me 3 hours to drive from one side of the other to the other. So there's no people here. So I just look at it as an opportunity. I'm really excited to get going.
Have you been at the farm much with everything that's been going on, or have you kind of been on the fly?
No. I mean, the reality is not a lot of wrestlers. Wrestlers are coming back July 1st. And what I can do there, I can do better here because there's a lot more recruits out east and in Midwest, and certainly there's California. But I would be sitting in my apartment on the phone. So I've been fixing up the house, getting it ready to sell, getting ready to sell the cars, getting my staff together, because that took a long time to get that all the guys we have now. Doing fundraising for Stanford, saying goodbye to our wrestlers, saying goodbye to our alumni, introducing myself to all the Stanford staff, the parents. I mean, it's just there's not enough hours in a day. Yeah. And so whether I'm sitting in an apartment in Palo Alto or whether I'm sitting in my house in Ithaca, it doesn't make a whole lot of difference. The only difference is I can be on the phone with a paintbrush in my hand out finishing the deck or staining the back deck, which my wife is made sure that I could do.
So mentioning coaching for 32 years and taking another job at another school, how long do you see yourself being at Stanford? Do you see this as you want to build this program, or you just kind of want to go there, make sure they have a program, and give it off to one of your other coaches? What is your mindset going into it?
I don't feel very, I kind of think I'm one of the young and up and coming coaches. I don't know. People keep saying just because I coached 32 years doesn't mean I'm old. I did start at Cornell when I was 12. So that makes me, I'm 44 now. But I mean, I still wrestle, so I'm not that old. At least I don't feel old. I do think, just because you're 55, it doesn't mean you're emotionally 55. I still feel like I'm pretty young. So I don't know. I've got at least 10 or 15 years left where I feel like, well, but who knows? Maybe when you hit 63 years old, you're an old man. I don't know. I don't think so. Our athletic director is 70, and he's got more vitality than most of the guys on our team. So I feel like I got a few good years left in me.
And mentioning prior, kind of, being a little bitter about not having a season and you guys were ready to go. Do you kind of have any hesitation with the athletic department of Stanford kind of knowing what they've been through, and, at any point you might have that rug pulled from underneath you? Or do you think what happened last year, having a national champ, all the notoriety and the money they raised, you're pretty safe there?
I mean, I didn't go out there with any expectation of dropping the program, right? That would be the last thing I would willingly do or knowingly. I'm not going out there with the expectation they're going to drop the stinking program again. I think they learned that wasn't the greatest idea, but I will say the best thing that ever happened is they dropped the program, because now they're bringing it back. But by the end of this week, tomorrow, and we'll have all the coaching positions endowed. We have a couple of scholarships endowed. We'll have, and just the changes that have occurred are pretty monumental. Had they not done that, there would not have been a call to arms, and I've seen that happen quite a few times. When programs get dropped, they come back with a vengeance, and so I'm not particularly worried about that. Our athletic director has been incredibly supportive. The associate AD has been incredibly supportive. Everywhere I turn, it's been extremely positive.
And talking about the search for coaches, the announcement came out, I believe it was yesterday, with your new hires. Speak a little bit about those guys and what led you to want to pursue those two gentlemen.
Well, I look for coaches who compliment me, for one. I know I've got some serious weaknesses and I've got some strengths. And so I look at Cornell. Mike Gray is my perfect counterpart. He's my yin and I'm yin to he's my yin to my yang. He's organized and he's punctual. Even not punctual. He's very very detail oriented. I'm all over the freaking place. I've got to have someone who can cross my T's and dot my I's. To that end, I brought in Enoch Francois. Enoch is a guy who I met many years ago. He was training at West Point, and I convinced him to come to Cornell. There was a teaching job available, and I thought, boy, he wanted to keep training, so I got him a teaching job. So this guy would get up in the morning, 5 o'clock, 4:30, come in, put our RTC wrestlers through a lift. Then he would go to school all day, teach crazy middle schoolers. Then he would be there. He was the assistant wrestling coach at the high school. Then he would come over and practice with us. Then he would go home and work on his PhD. And during that whole process, he ended up taking third in the U.S. Open in freestyle, third in the U.S. Open in Greco. So he's on the national team in both styles. Just amazingly mature and intelligent young man. So he was one of my first choices to bring him in. And then Vincenzo Joseph from Penn State, who I'd watched wrestle for years and years, and was incredibly technical, and yet he was also one of the most personable, warm, engaging people that for a young man. I recruited him. Unfortunately, he went to Penn State. Knucklehead isn't obviously very smart because he went to the wrong place, but we never beat him. And so I was able to convince him to come and start his coaching career with us. So I know he's going to have it. And they're both extremely warm. They're going to be natural recruiters. So those are the two guys I wanted in my staff. And then I'm going to be hopefully naming my volunteer assistant in the near future. On top of that, we built the RTC staff. I've got Ben Honus, who was one of my ex-wrestlers. Ben was an All-American, wrestled for us when he was knee-high to a grasshopper. He lives 30 minutes up the road. Heck, he spent the night over our house after the prom, for heaven's sakes, and then he's someone I know really well. Took second in the U.S. Open once and placed at the 7th another time. So he's had much more successful international or freestyle career. Then we got Tyler Berger from the University of Nebraska, who's 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, I believe, at the NCAAs. And then Grant Leaf, who I've known. I also recruited Grant Leaf. I think I recruited all of them. So I finally had to pay him to come and wrestle for me. So and then I'm bringing my current RTC coach at Cornell, Ahad. I don't know if you know Ahad, Salhan Jahad. I don't even want to try to pronounce his last name because I screwed up so bad. Jaban Sahali. And then we've got Kerry McCoy still out there. And then Travis Lee is coming on board as well. He works about 10 minutes from Palo Alto. So it's an amazing staff that we've been able to put together in a very short period of time. And we're just going to slowly cherry pick a few more RTC athletes over the next couple of years.
Nice. That's a well-rounded staff you got there. Question for Vincenzo. Listening to the Boshamania podcast, you guys kind of had that little banter going back and forth. Was that all organic? Had you guys been in contact previously to when you were on the podcast?
That was actually the first time I talked to him.
Okay.
Yeah, and since I recruited him when he was in high school. So that was then I called him up after the interview and offered him the job.
Okay. And when you were on the Bader show, were you at his house when that all went down and that gentleman came in and tried to put you in like a rear naked choke and you covered that?
No, that was actually Joe Galli. It was a former, he was not a teammate of mine, but he is the CEO of Milwaukee, a company called TTI. They own Milwaukee Tools, Ryobi, Dirt Devil, Hoover. I didn't know if he wanted, at the time I was worried. He said they didn't want anybody to know who this guy is, but I don't know. I worry about confidentiality, but no, he's actively involved in the Stanford program and it's been very, very supportive of the program. His son wrestled for Stanford.
Nice. And you mentioned Travis. We've talked to Mike Gray a week ago, and his name came up, and he was, as a lightweight, he was a guy that we kind of looked up to, and it seemed like after Travis there was a run of guys right around that 125, 133 in your program that really excelled at the NCAA level. Can you talk a little bit about Travis and the impact that he had on the program, and then also kind of what he's been doing and how?
Yeah, Travis doesn't get enough credit because we've had so many great wrestlers come after him, but he was a guy who really put us on the map. And I remember recruiting Travis. He was from Hawaii, and the state of Hawaii had never had an All-American in the history of wrestling. At least Division I had never had an All-American. So he was the first ever, and he was not only a first ever, but he was a freshman All-American, and he was the first freshman All-American ever for Cornell. And then he went on to be a 4-time All-American and 2-time national champion. He was, to this day, the toughest wrestler I've ever coached, including Dake. He was just that tough. Now Kyle's a better, more powerful, better athlete, better technician, and every other, thing you can gauge, but just the sheer unwavering desire to win. I've never seen anything like it. He was incredible. But he ultimately hurt his neck and wasn't able to wrestle. I think he would have been an Olympic gold medalist. He was that good, and he was getting better until he had to retire. But when I recruited Travis, I remember I went to bed late, or I'd wake up early because he would be training until, I don't know, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, which was 5 or 4 in the morning. And so I think I was the only coach who was that determined to call the guy and make sure I kept recruiting him. And it got down to guard. It was Emory Riddle, Aeronautic and Aerospace Engineering School out in Arizona, and Cornell. They were NAIA school. And those were the choices, and no one else recruited him. So he chose Cornell. Then he went and won Fargo in both styles that year. And I think I was cheering against him because I didn't want anybody to jump on the bandwagon. And people did try, because Cornell doesn't have a national letter of intent. You can steal us anyone away from us at any time. And we weren't that good back then. And he was the crown jewel, like, oh my God, we got this amazing wrestler. And so we were able to get him, and he was a biological engineer for us at Cornell. Studied his butt off. It's a really tough program, and that's what he went into. He went into actually engineering, and I can't remember what type of engineering he's doing right now. It's not biological engineering, but he's worked for a technology company in the Bay Area, and it's I think he said it's about 12 minutes from Stanford. Nice.
Would you consider that one of your greatest recruiting accomplishments, getting a kid from Hawaii to go to Ithaca, New York?
Yeah, that was a bait and switch, right? Bring him out in the summer. You're like, what the coach? I don't swear, but what the F is going on here? That little accent, Hawaiian accent. Like he didn't realize he never was here in the summer. It was beautiful this summer, beautiful up until early fall, and horrible in the winter and spring. Well, that's when you're at school at Cornell. It's winter, pretty much all winter and spring. And he just hated the weather. He couldn't get out of here fast enough. But now, he went back to, ended up going back to San Francisco. Went to San Francisco, and probably would have gone back to Hawaii if the industry was there for him. But I'm glad he went where he went, because now we're getting him at Stanford.
That's awesome.
And mentioning the weather, obviously Cornell has one of the best facilities in the country now, so that's probably a little bit easier for recruiting. But do you think going to Stanford, being in Palo Alto, it's just going to be way easier to recruit kids because it's not going to be hard to get kids to go to Palo Alto, California.
If it's anything like recruiting coaches, the answer is yes. Because it was a lot easier to convince people to go up there. I was shocked at how many people were interested. And what we're doing with our coaches is it's a little different. So we're building a program around bringing in people and offering them jobs that are very flexible to their training work experience, and they'll offer them ultimately a fantastic career upon ending their retiring. And it's a little different. If you go to every other RTC, they'll pay you X amount of dollars, and then when you retire, you start your career. With us, what we're doing is we're paying you X amount of dollars, but you're going to work and you're going to develop a resume, and when you retire, you're going to have a career already established. And so for people who have any foresight, it's the best option. Unless 100% you're going to go into coaching, that doesn't matter. You can always go into coaching with what we're doing, but if you don't, you're going to be way ahead of the game.
And mentioning that, setting guys up for jobs after coaching or when they retire from coaching. And I know you're one of the guys who kind of coined the term being a CEO of a program. How much are you thinking about that as you're bringing guys on? What else can they do besides wrestling, and how can you set them up? And how important is that as a head coach to be looking out for your assistants prior to being or after being in the program?
I didn't coin the phrase. People said that about me, which I appreciate. I think it's a nice thing. I do remember one of my assistants was mad at me one time. He goes, "You run the program like it's a business, and you can't run a wrestling program." I'm like, you know what? That was the biggest compliment I've ever been given. But it's not. That's kind of an offshoot of what we do for our wrestlers. Our kids, when they come in, at least at Cornell and now at Stanford, from day one, as soon as we bring them in, we start developing the resume so that they can have a job in the summer and be prepared to go on and have a more successful life after wrestling than they did possibly with wrestling. What I really am excited about at Stanford is in Ithaca, there is nothing other than, it's a one shop town. You either if you work for Cornell, that's great. If you don't, there's nothing there. And in Stanford, you've got San Jose and San Francisco, 20 minutes and 25 minutes down the road. So it's going to be very easy for me to set up summer internships for these guys, and then keep them here. And in Ithaca, man, you got to go to New York City, or you got to go to Chicago or wherever. I'm going to be able to keep my talent local. I'm going to be able to keep my Kyle Dakes and Yiannis and Vito Rujas in town if they decide to get out of coaching, out of the sport, because not everybody can go into coaching. There's only so many jobs out there. And that's going to be a huge advantage for us. And as far as just hiring the coaches, it'll take us a little bit of time, but if you look at how long it's taken us to amass this staff, think of what we're going to do in a year, and then it's going to translate into getting better recruits. And I'm confident and I'm saying that we're going to have a fantastic recruiting class this year. I haven't got them accepted yet. I've got to work on that side of it because I haven't gone through admissions, but I don't believe it'll be that much more rigorous than Cornell.
What is the level for entry? Is it the same as Cornell, or is it a little bit less? Because I know it is, they call it the Ivy League of the West Coast or whatever.
Yeah, you have to ask me in a couple. Caltech will fight you on that, but yeah, it's ask me in a few weeks, right, or a few months. I haven't gone through it yet, but from what I understand, and I've talked to admissions, it's very, very stringent. But so is Cornell. I think it'll probably be, the exceptions won't be as great, but I think they'll be similar type of kids that we'll be bringing in.
Yeah. Tell you a quick story real quick, Coach. When I was in high school, I got recruited more to wrestle coming out of high school than I did to run, but I was a 103 pounder as a senior. And after my senior year, or maybe it was before the senior season started, I got a recruiting letter from Stanford. And I was so excited because I've always had this manifest destiny type of thing. I've lived in California for a handful of years too, as an adult. But I was so excited. I brought all the stuff into the guidance counselor, and she was like, Stanford's like the Harvard of the West. And I was just so crestfallen that I didn't really do anything after that, because I just figured, not knowing what I know now, how like, people can do things and we can work on things, and you can make things happen if the effort and the will is there. And had I known that, I might have pursued that a little bit more. But that was my first introduction to Stanford as a high school student. I've since spent a good amount of time at Palo Alto coaching and doing other things. But it is a beautiful place, and it is an unbelievable campus. So it's definitely going to be a good place to recruit to. And coming out of Jersey, we would highly recommend that, as you probably already know, but Region 6 is a hotbed. So if you got any shore kids that might want to go out there, and it's far enough away from the ocean, you don't have to worry about them going surfing either.
Well, it is, there is a difference. I have every day 4 or 5 people reach out to me, and really good people who are really good students. And I didn't get that at Cornell. And we have a great team, and we've got the best facility in the world. And yet there's not the same desire. There's not that same excitement just from the norm, just the typical person. You have at Cornell, you can get them excited about Cornell, but you got to go out and reach out, convince them, hey, this is the place to go. Whereas there's much more brand recognition. There's a more brand awareness, and there's more excitement, at least from the parents that have been contacting me about sending their kids to Stanford.
Yeah. And, you mentioned in the beginning of the conversation about, the motivation behind the move and the taking the position was the new challenge of taking on the program. What are some of the hurdles maybe that you see that are possibly different at a Stanford than as a Cornell when you took over the program there and started building?
So where we started when I came in as an assistant coach with Jack Spates, and I consider that when I took over in a weird way, because we came in together, we had one wrestling mat. I mean, I tell this story a million times. We would take vans to wrestle, in New York City, which is 4 or 5 hours away. I remember taking a team and staying in parents' houses and on cots. I mean, it just was a different level. When we had a wrestling match, we had to tear up the gymnastics floor, untape our mats, bring the mat, untape the mat, because it came in like 10, 15 sections, pull it across the hallway into the gymnastics floor, put it down, tape it up, pull the bleachers out, match would get done, take the mats down, pull them back, it was a lot of work. And we had nothing. And we would have to recruit. I had to remember recruiting about 125 to 150 kids a year. We would try to get them to have their full application. So I had to get about 35 kids to do a full application, because there was no common application back then. So it took a great deal of work to get someone to do it. Because if you remember back when you were applying to school, you'd write 7 different essays for 6 different schools. So you didn't apply to as many schools. And then Cornell would look at these. We weren't allowed to prioritize it. So Cornell would pick who they wanted, and we might get 18 kids in, but it might be 5 of them, 10 of them the same weight, and then once they got in March, in April, they would give us their financial aid, and we'd see if they could afford it. It was unbelievably inefficient. So we would spend thousands and thousands of dollars on kids that weren't going to get in, or if they did get in, couldn't afford it. And thousands and thousands of man hours recruiting kids, wasting our time. Stanford is not like that. They have beautiful facilities. They've got not only fantastic financial aid, as good as any school in the world. They have some scholarships. We need to increase the number of scholarships they offer. But I don't look at it as they only have half the allotment of scholarships. I look at it as, holy crap, they got half a scholarship, half the allotment of scholarships, because at Cornell we didn't have any of that. So I'm able to use that. And we've got palm trees and we've got sun, which is a huge advantage, So I walk into situations like this, see what we have. I don't see what you don't have. All I see is what they have. And so, as I said, I don't see disadvantages. I only see the advantages.
Excellent. Yeah, it's an unbelievable campus. I've been fortunate enough to spend some time at the track and coach some track meets and stuff like that. And just walking around, it's just unbelievable. I'm like, oh man, if I could afford to live here, this would be the spot. Because I think you mentioned it too. I might have been on Bader, but you come into San Francisco, and good majority of the time when you come into San Francisco, it's going to be cloudy. It's going to be, you got that gray bay effect, and then you get in the car and drive south, and as soon as you get away from the bay, the sun opens up, and it's just another world down there, and it's an easy sell for sure.
Yeah, no, it was interesting. I did not care for San Francisco. That was shocking. I think I don't know if I told the story where my wife and I, we wanted to see the Golden Gate Bridge, and we drove up there, and the wind's blowing 30 miles an hour. It's freezing. It's overcast. And it was horrible. Like, oh my God. Okay, well, let's go. Then we went by the wharf, and it was still cold and miserable. And then we drove down, and I was like, well, let's see the bums, because I've heard a lot about it, and we're driving all around, and we couldn't find them anywhere. It was like and then as you said, the clouds opened, the sky parted, and the sun came out, and there they were. It was unbelievable. There were blocks and blocks and blocks of just tents. It was so sad, and it was just I can't imagine living in this city, and it just wasn't very appealing to me. But then we drove to Palo Alto, and it was just a completely different world. It was beautiful, and it was clean. It felt safe, and at least 10 degrees warmer. Yeah. Of course, maybe that was because it was 3 hours later in the day. I don't know. Maybe that was had something to do with it. But no, it was much nicer.
Yeah. You know what Mark Twain said about San Francisco?
No.
Coldest winter of my life was the summer I spent in San Francisco.
Yeah, well, and he grew up in Elmira, New York, so I don't know what he was thinking.
Coach, mentioning starting out at Cornell with Jack Spates and that journey, when I know you were assistant with him and then became the head coach, at what point did you kind of see that you could kind of take Cornell and do what you did with it? Or was it just head down, I got to do the best I can, and at some point you realize, oh, now we got Travis Lee, and now we got all these guys coming on? How did that work out?
Well, it was when we got the Friedman Wrestling Center. It was, that was really the big move, and we were able to, and we had a really good team before we moved into Friedman Center. But once we got the Friedman Center, you could see the quality and the quantity of talented wrestlers. It was times two. It was literally twice as many kids we could get. Before we'd get one or two great kids, one or two good kids, and then the rest were kids who were just, good high school wrestlers, but not college wrestlers. And then all of a sudden now it's every kid we get is a very, very good kid. And then we had a couple of great ones on top of that. And those very good kids, a couple would surprise you every year. And I always thought, if we could just get the best Ivy League kids every year, we could win a national championship. And we've come really close. And last year we would have been right there if we had a season. And it didn't happen. And then the NCAA prolonged eligibility, which allowed Iowa to have that another extra year, which kind of put a stake through our heart, because we had it all teed up to win it. And Cornell doesn't allow kids to wrestle as graduate students. They will this 1 year, but in general they don't allow it. So all of our kids are going to go on and graduate and wrestle for somebody else.
And that's across the board in the Ivy League, right?
Yes. It's very, very frustrating. It doesn't make any sense. If you graduate, heck, you graduate in 3 years and they won't let you wrestle in graduate school. It doesn't make any sense. It's just asinine.
Yeah.
What's the reason for that? And has the coaches ever tried to get together and change that, or is the Ivy League so stringent on rules like that?
I think it has nothing to do with the coaches. It has to do with upper level management. It's I don't know if it's disdain for athletics. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me. I don't think they care at that level. I think they think, well, it's just about the college experience. I don't think you have a lot of the presidents that are athletes in Ivy League that, I just don't think that's something that really resonates. I don't think it's that important to them, to be honest. I don't think they even want to talk about it because it doesn't matter that much to them.
Do you guys get red shirts at Stanford?
Yeah, you can redshirt at Stanford.
How much? I know there's ways to work around that in the Ivy League, but how much of a game changer is something like that?
I mean, the things that the Ivy League do, you can do anywhere. So it's not like they're working around it. If you take your year off, or you defer, those are things you could do it at every school, and then redshirt. So it's not as if it's at leveling the playing field. It's just it's just one way we get for kids who want to keep that extra year. But other schools could do the same thing and then redshirt, so it's still not an advantage.
And how many of those guys are going to end up graduating with extra eligibility? Will Yianni have extra? All of them, yeah.
All of them, yeah. Probably all of them. Yianni's been out of school, yet we kept Yianni out of school so he couldn't graduate, and it's just wrong. You're keeping a person, you shouldn't be slowing a person down academically so that they can wrestle. But that's in essence what their rules are doing. It's not encouraging academic excellence. It's discouraging it if someone really cares about the sport. And that's what's my greatest frustration is as a coach, I don't philosophically believe you should do that. Hold a person out, keeping them away, from graduation. Encourage them to take those classes, encourage them to go on and go to grad school. But by all means, encourage them to do it at Cornell or, at the Ivy League. Don't encourage them to do it elsewhere. And I've had quite a few kids who have gone on and wrestled. A kid wrestled at Lehigh, a kid wrestled at Hoff. We had a couple at Hofstra. It's very frustrating when you're wrestling against one of your former wrestlers, and they didn't transfer because they wanted to. They did because they had to.
Yeah.
And Coach, we actually, some of your coaching tree is probably the most coaches we've had on the podcast. We've had Mike on, we've had Damian Hahn. He's from the same area as us. And we've had Coach Nickerson. And I think for the longest time, a lot of the coaching tree in the NCAA Division I was from, two schools, was from Iowa and Oklahoma State. What's it like for you to see your coaches going out and having success?
Well, we've had, it's great. You got Brian Smith. I don't know if you had Brian Smith on, and you had Matt Azevedo and Jeremy Spates, and I'm trying to think of the other guys we've had. I got a lot of guys out there. I was talking about this earlier today with someone. And I love to take credit for it, but I think a lot of it is the fact that Cornell, you have to be creative and you have to know everything about coaching to be successful. You have to learn how to do fundraising. You have to work with admissions. You have to obviously work in a very competitive academic environment. So you learn all these different tools. You have all these tools in your arsenal, and all those can be applied elsewhere. And whereas if you go to Iowa, well, you don't have to do the fundraising because it's already been taken care of for you. Admissions is simple because if you can sign your name on the dotted line, you're going to get in. With a 2.5 or better and 1,000 on your SATs, you don't have to recruit as hard. Some of those, then you have scholarships. So if the kid can afford it, you just give them a scholarship. Or can't afford it, you give them a scholarship. Whereas at Cornell, you got to find the kids who can't afford it or can afford it. That's a tricky combination. And you got to find those kids who can do the work. And then when you get them in, you have to be very sensitive to their academic needs. You can't make a guy who's a pre-med or an engineer work the same type of grind him out when he's getting ready for tests, because these guys are, my son was a physics engineer. He would spend 24 hours on one problem set. Just insane amount of time some of these kids put into their academics, and they're not coming here to Cornell just to wrestle. They want to have both, and so you have to be sensitive to that. And if you are, and if you can help these kids, that they can still be Travis Lee type of athletes. But you got to be able to make sure these kids are in the right programs too. You can't get a kid who's got 1,000 on their SATs trying to put him into engineering, or else he's going to get crushed.
Mention with Iowa, being a little bit easier, needing a 2.5, and obviously you're going to Stanford, it's not easier to get in. Have you ever been like, man, I just got to go to a school it's not Ivy League, a little bit easier to get in? Or do you enjoy having high? By the way,
I was that guy. So, there's I wasn't a good student, and I wasn't a great student in high school. So I'm not trying to disparage.
No, not at all.
The vast majority of wrestlers are not going to get into the top schools. And I certainly would never have gotten into a top school, for heaven's sake. So, I'm not trying to insult them. It's just, there's, most kids can get into those schools with because they're great wrestlers. It doesn't mean they're going to get out of those schools. It just means they're going to get in those schools. But anyway, I lost your question. I'm sorry.
Have you ever thought of maybe going to a school with an easier entry level just to get,
No, I actually, I've been offered jobs at a lot of places that have had, I just didn't want to, it wasn't that I didn't want to work with those kids. I just really enjoy working with the Cornell type of kids and the Stanford type of kids. Both my sons went to Cornell. I love to be around that type of conversation. I was telling someone earlier today, I was, that you're on a bus or you're on a plane, and kids talking about physics, engineering, or archaeology, or when I was on a bus with another kid, I remember looking at Justin Kerber, and he was reading an economics book, and it was on financial modeling. I said, "What class is that for?" He goes, "Oh, I'm just reading it. It's interesting." I'm like, "All right, you're a nerd, right?" Somebody get this guy a penthouse. It's like, what is wrong with you? But our guys were not talking about that kind of stuff when I was at North Carolina. It's interesting. It's just much more stimulating to me. Maybe I've gotten old. I guess I have gotten old, because I really enjoy that kind of conversation, and learning about some of the new breakthroughs in genetic engineering, or whatever they're talking about that particular day. It's just absolutely fascinating.
I was just gonna say, what about Dylan? Did he have a penthouse? He seemed like the kind of guy that might have a penthouse.
Dylan?
Yeah, Palacio.
Do they even have that magazine anymore? It's like Dylan Palacio is actually very interesting. So I was talking to him a couple months ago, and it was his knowledge of cryptocurrency and blockchain technology was dumbfounding. I couldn't believe, he's probably our wealthiest graduate from that era. No kidding. I mean, he's done incredibly well, and he reads voraciously. He knows his stuff, and he's goofy as heck, but yet he is really amazing. I mean, it's just the transformation that he's gone through since he graduated, and I think if you talk to him, you'd be. Well, I mean, if he's not wrestling in a thong, he still does ridiculous stuff, but in a professional setting, he'll blow you away.
He's what Jake Paul and Logan Paul really want to be.
Yeah, well, they've done pretty well.
No, they're doing right? Themselves for sure.
They're done like foxes, those guys. But yeah, Dylan is. I tell you, he's pretty impressive, actually.
Quite possibly one of the greatest post-match speeches ever in NCAA history, in my opinion. After his, I believe it was the quarterfinals.
Yeah,
and he pinned the kid from Iowa in the Peterson.
I think it was Kemmer.
Yeah.
It was Kemmer. It's long. Well, I think it was long. That was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And Kemmer was still wrestling. I think he's got another year.
Yeah, that's crazy. Well, talking about guys like Kyle, guys like Dylan, guys like Yianni, guys that are high performers on so many different levels, and with their course load and the work and the studying that they have to do, and what it'll probably be similar in regards with the high level on both ends at Stanford. Is it an individualized type of training in terms of when guys are working out, or are there individual practices because of the high workload and that sort of stuff?
No, you still have regular schedule, but yeah, I mean, well, at Cornell, and I'm sure at Stanford, we have a very eclectic group of kids. You can't go out and just pick your recruit. Okay, I want everybody to be short and stocky or tall and lank. You have to get kids who can get in, can afford it, can't afford it. Can or can't. It's an interesting combination, because you got to find the kids who can fall into a certain financial category to be poor enough to afford the school, or wealthy enough to afford it. And so you can't be picky in that regard. You just have to have kids who are really good students, who are great wrestlers, and they come in all body shapes and sizes. And so as far as the training goes, you can't make a Ben Darmstead, who's 6'5", and make him wrestle like a Troy Nickerson, who was a short little bull like guy, or Macalunas, if you remember Macalunas. I mean, they don't have this. You can't force them all to wrestle the same way. So So I do allow different, we encourage different styles, and guys didn't wrestle. I didn't teach them how to become successful. And we're recruiting these guys, and they're all state champs and national place winners or whatever. And they weren't because of how I wrestled. So you don't want to change what got them, made them successful in the first place. That being said, I do have a system I believe in. I believe in top wrestling, which I don't like it necessarily. I just know it works in folk style wrestling. You have to be good on top. I mean, you look at what Penn State's done the last couple of years, and people are like, oh, they're stalling. They're winning. It's just change the rules if you don't like the style. But that's what works. I mean, if you're how they're hooking the back leg and they're keeping the guys down, they're getting the riding time point. And a riding time point is not 1 point, it's 2, because you're riding the guy, he's not getting escape, and you're getting escape. You're winning 2-0. And you ask yourself, how many matches have you won or lost by 2 points? I mean, probably for the best wrestlers in the country, probably almost every match they lost was by 2 points. And so if you can win, if you can get those 2 points every time, and Kyle Dake was the master of it, you're going to win almost every single match. And so that's something we do I put a heavy emphasis on that style, on that part of the sport. And there's some schools that don't ride. They do not ride. They think it's freestyle. I believe a lot of defense. I mean, I think you got to have a really strong defense. Maybe it's because that's how I was. But I also, obviously you have to have a great offense, but I think it's easier to defend a great wrestler than to take him down and then beat him on the mat. But doesn't mean we're not in great shape and go hard. It's just, there are certain things I train more than perhaps other schools. And I think it's paid dividends for us at Cornell. Now, Yianni Diakomihalis, he doesn't have to focus on that much. Aruja doesn't have to worry about that because they're so overpoweringly good on their feet. But those are the exceptions to the rule.
And you're active in the freestyle community, in the freestyle world. Do you have an opinion? Would you like to see freestyle in the NCAA level, or do you like the folk style and the breakup between folk style and freestyle? Or could there be like a hybrid style that could take some of the good, like the push out rule, and could that be implemented in folk style to do away with like the objective stall calls?
Well, I 100%. I agree with exactly what you just said. Is what I would like. I mean, I do prefer freestyle now, but I understand people aren't ready to make that change, and people don't like what they don't understand. If you've never done freestyle, it's alien to them, and so it's hard to understand the scoring. But once you get in and really start watching it a lot, it's really hard not to like freestyle more than folk style, in my opinion. There's just much more scoring. There's more opportunities. If you get down by 5-8 points, you can come back. It's just not that hard. But there are things in freestyle I don't like. I don't think you should get an ankle ace and be able to turn a guy 5 times in the first 5 seconds of a match and be over. I think I don't like that. I like the push out rule. People say, oh, it's going to become sumo. Well, it hasn't become sumo in freestyle. And what happens is people, being able, they're going to get pushed out. They do things, they make mistakes, and they get scored on. So yeah, exactly what you were saying. I would like to see kind of a hybrid of freestyle, folk style. I'm not so big on the Greco side of it, but you get, a few people say, well, what about Greco? Like, it's kind of slow. It's kind of boring, yeah. other than the throws and the lifts, which are fun, but I don't think we're going to ever see that take hold in the United States.
I think Greco is a great teaching tool for young kids. And I wish I'm sure Jimmy would agree with me. We both probably wish someone would have forced us to do it coming up, because we were open style wrestlers and we're deathly terrified of getting into tie-ups and stuff. We wish that would have been good. I also have an opinion that I think, getting back to the riding time and stuff like that, I would like to see personally, for every minute you get a point.
Yeah, I mean, I felt that way too. I for a long time, and people say, "Oh, it's going to get boring." I'm like, no, it means the guy will get off bottom. He's not going to get ridden. Yeah. But that's not going to happen. I think it's moving the opposite direction.
Yeah, like mentioning Kyle before his match against Frank Molinaro, he should have got like 6 points riding time. Yeah. If you go back and you think of that, and you think about how good Frankie was getting out on bottom, and Kyle was able to just ride him for 5 or 6 minutes, how impressive that is.
Well, it used to be that way, it used to be a point for every minute.
Yeah.
And mentioning liking freestyle, but not thinking people are ready to let go of Scholastic. Do you think as a country doing Scholastic holds us back on the international level?
I imagine it probably does. It has to, right? I mean, and I also think Scholastic is much harder on your body. I can to this day, I can wrestle freestyle. It'd be much easier. If I'm in wrestling Scholastic, it's just so painful for me. Hurts. It's much more physical, harder on your neck, harder on your joints. Freestyle, there's less injuries, far less injuries. So there's other reasons why I think freestyle is the way to go. But there doesn't, I mean, when I was wrestling, there was a push, and it actually started, there was actually the point where there was a 1 count for a back points. It was moving in that way, and then it kind of came back again for some reason. I don't know what happened.
Coach, one of the things we like to always ask the coaches that we have on, and, you know, coming from New Jersey, where there's a wrestling club on every corner. And, you know, over the years, we've seen many of crazy wrestling parents. And we both personally know a couple kids that probably won state titles just on fumes because they were over wrestling by the time they even got to high school, but were so technically sound that they were still able to win a state title or two. Do you have any feedback or advice for young parents that are, you know, maybe getting their kids into wrestling? They were former high school wrestlers, and about not living vicariously through your kids, or advice on how to navigate the waters to make sure the kids actually do get to college fired up and ready to take on the college level?
I've got advice. They won't listen to it, you know. But yeah, you got to count your matches. Your body only has so many matches in you, and you know, figure out if you want them to be your best days to be in high school or in college, and make a decision accordingly. I mean, I can't tell you the number of shoulder injuries that our guys have these days, and it's a repetition use injury. It's overuse. You know, I don't remember anybody having all the shoulder surgeries that we had back in my day. They just didn't have. Occasionally, you'd have a person would have a shoulder that would dislocate, but that was once in a blue moon. Now you've got labrum surgery every week, it seems, and you know, I really believe that's from just wrestling from your 5 to 6 years old, wrestling 365 days out of the year. When I was wrestling, I wrestled from November till March, and then I played baseball and I played soccer, you know, and so my body recovered. Now you don't have that recovery time, and I don't think it's good. I do think you need to have. I mean, wrestling is not golf; it's not tennis. You know, you don't want your kid crippled and walking with a limp by the time he's 30 years old.
Yeah, that's what Coach Steiner had said too, was that, you know, you got about a 10-year window. So make your decision. Do you want it to be from 5 to 15? Would you rather it be 10 to 20 or 15 to 25? You know, but you've really got maybe a 10-year window when you can really kind of go through the wear and tear. And after that, it can get a little dicier, go sideways. So it seems to be a common theme and again, when we grew up, you know, 3 sport athletes was a common thing. It wasn't uncommon to have 3 sport athletes, where now, you know, it's almost sometimes maybe it hurts the recruiting process for some kids because they might play some other sports. Talk about your situation coming up. I know you said you played different sports, but I mean, you grew up in a wrestling family. You know, your dad is legendary. Talk about what that situation was like, how that's impacted you both as an athlete, as a coach, as a father.
Yeah, my dad coached Penn State, but I think the bigger influence was my 3 older brothers who would beat the living tar out of me every day. I mean, it was a matter of survival. And so I mean, those guys had probably as bigger influence on me, although I did go up to Penn State and we'd roll around up there, and I was just around it all the time. So you learn by watching and, you know, observing as much as not as much, but by, you know, but certainly to some level, just by being around the sport, you pick things up, you see how people train, you see the little nuances of how they move and how they, you know, I mean, so I was always around it. And I think that was, even though I might not have been wrestling actively, I picked things up. I know I did. So, you know, that how he coached. I mean, he was one of the kindest men I knew. I mean, he was just a gentle soul. and yet he was World War II vet. He probably killed people. You'd never know. It was not something he never talked about until he went to Omaha Beach 50 years for the 50-year reunion. They came back and talked about it nonstop. And you could just tell it was just things he didn't want to think about. But the wrestling, probably the biggest impact he made on me was what he didn't do. He didn't push, and he wasn't that crazy parent. He let my brothers do the same thing. And I'm sure he told them what to tell me. And I'm sure he told his wrestlers what to instruct me. And I wasn't smart enough to figure that out, because if he told me to jump, I was going to sit down, but if John Fritz told me the same thing, I would do it till I passed out, so he was very intelligent about how he pushed, and he let me make my own mistakes. And that's why I'm probably still in the sport. I'm not burned out on it. It's why I enjoy it.
Do you remember the moments where you got the best of your older brothers?
No, because they didn't really let me get the best of them, because when I started being able to get the best of them, they didn't wrestle me anymore.
I know that feeling, Coach.
Yeah. I mean, I remember, I will say, I took my brother up. I came back from college one day. I took my Mike, and I beat him so badly at Rec Hall, and just beat him. I mean, it was a wonderful experience. And to this day, he tells his friends how in his mind, Bubby came back and he took me down. I took him down 3 times. Like, what world are you living in? He's delusional. And it was even now, I can't even get the satisfaction of him knowing that I beat him, because in his mind, he recreated the whole experience. He was like, what are you talking about? You did not beat me. So that was a little bit frustrating, but Chris was too big. I mean, I never got to wrestle with Chris. And then Dave, I don't remember if I wrestled much with Dave. He went on to the military and never came back and wrestled, hurt his knee, and I never got a chance to put it on him. But it usually is my next closest to age was Mike, and I gave him a good beat down, but he doesn't remember it.
It's the Mandela effect.
He blocked it out.
Coach, we got some questions. We're going to throw a little bit of a wrestling flair on some of these questions we ask our guests. First things first, what is your favorite wrestling shoe of all time, and what current wrestling shoe are you training in?
I had an Adidas. It was a kangaroo leather Adidas. It was old school. It was the 3 stripes. I don't know what the name of it is, but I still remember it. I had it patched up when I wore through the leather, because I wore it so long. But back in those days, you'd wear shoes for 10 years. You wear them, and we would give them, our coaches, we had a box full of them, and every year you'd hope you didn't get the same pair, because they would wear them out, but you'd get these old shoes, and they never wore out. And I remember I even had the old the canvas ones. So that was my favorite shoe. And then what was that next question? I missed it.
What are you wearing now? What shoe?
I wear whatever they give me. I wear an Adidas. I'll wear a Rudis. I'll wear anything they have. But what I'm waiting for is the Spartan shoe, which is coming out soon. And it'll be a Dake Spartan shoe. Or hey, now with name, brand, likeness, it'll probably be a Yianni. You know what I mean? If this thing goes through. But it's a really nice shoe. It's actually I think it's very close to a Gable is what I would compare it to.
Nice. Coach, is it stance in motion or stance and motion?
I always thought it was stance and motion.
Okay.
It's not stance in motion. Stance in motion. Interesting. I never thought about that. Stance in motion. I thought it was stance and motion, but it might be stance in motion, but I'm going with stance in motion. What do you go with?
I was always a stance in motion guy, but
Jesus.
I may have just heard it wrong, and then it just stuck in my head. Same thing like when your brother denies getting his butt whooped.
Stance, if you're doing a stance in motion, that does make sense. I mean, so I think you go either way.
Yeah. Cool.
Coach, what is your favorite match to watch of all time? Or do you have a favorite wrestler you like to study their tape?
Well, I love watching the old Schultz stuff, but that's kind of my favorite stuff. I do like watching Dave. Dave was a good friend, and he was the one who brought me over to Foxcatcher. I was wrestling for New York Athletic Club. So, and as far as old time matches, my favorite, I don't have a single, but I got to tell you, I love watching the old timers, and they're bouncing around with their arms like this, and, they dive in. It just cracks me up. And I'm like, I wonder if I look like that. So I went, and I don't watch my old matches. And so I found some matches, and there's one match, me wrestling Dave, another one Kenny Monday. I don't look that bad. I'm like, I look like a normal wrestler. And I was like, it made me feel good. I'm like, I don't look antiquated wrestling like the old timers. So made me feel a little better.
Piggybacking off of that, as a coach, and when you're recruiting, in the recruiting process, and everyone knows you as Cornell for the last 32 years, do they know about your wrestling prowess, or do they just know of your coaching credentials?
No, they have no clue. Hey, kids don't remember past 3 years.
Yeah.
They won't. They don't know John Smith.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unless, some do, but most don't. They know Kyle Dake and Jordan Burroughs and Yianni Diakomihalis and Jaden Cox. Kyle Snyder. That's it. There's a few others, but not many. Yeah. Not many.
They might not even know.
I bet you the majority of them wouldn't know who Kendall Cross is.
Oh, that's a bummer.
Yeah. He hasn't really stayed. He stayed in the sport to some degree, but he's not a coach, I thought he was one of the more prolific wrestlers of the time. But if you ask, he's a 17-year-old kid. I bet you 75 to 80, maybe 90% don't know who Kendall Cross is. Yeah. And I'm not picking on Kendall. Kendall, if you're out there, I'm not picking you. But he's like, he's a great wrestler. How do you not know him? If there was a baseball player of his status or stature, people would know him.
Yeah. Well, I know I'm getting old when kids in Jersey don't know who Damian Hahn or Mike Gray are anymore. Like, to me, that just boggles my mind.
Yeah. No, it's amazing.
Coach, are you a coffee drinker?
Yeah.
How do you take your coffee? How do you brew your coffee?
Black. All right. And I don't brew my own. I buy it. So
all right.
I'm that guy.
Well, you got some good coffee roasters out there in Palo Alto.
That's what I hear. I heard that twice today. So I'm pretty excited about it.
Yeah.
I'm going to go get some fancy dancy machine and see if I can't get get a good grinder and do it myself.
Hey, Coach, if you just like regular black coffee and you're not looking for espresso or anything, go get an Adobe AeroPress. It's a little plastic thing. You put it upside down for 5 minutes and you do a pour over. It's a cleaner way of doing a French press, but that's what we use, and it's money. And a little bit of a pro tip, it's all about the water that you use.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, we had a former NASA scientist on who now has a company called Third Wave Water, and he couldn't figure out why he couldn't replicate the coffee house coffee at home. And so he was friends with the local roaster, and they started talking, and it turns out that there's some sort of barista federation or whatever that has a specific pH water profile for a coffee shop brewing. And what he did was they took that water profile that goes through the filtration stuff, and he dehydrated it so that when you at home, you get a gallon of distilled water, and then you put that water profile, dehydrated water, into the distilled water. And then that's going to give you that perfect pH water profile that, the filtered systems that the coffee houses have.
So one of the things I did at the Friedman Center, I put inordinate amount of money into our coffee machines. We have a beautiful little cafe area, and one of our, you probably won't approve of this, but one of our parents owns a bunch of Dunkin' Donuts. And so we have the real espresso and coffee maker and grinder and a lifetime supply of Dunkin' Donut coffee. Now, our guys go through a lot of coffee, so we're not going to be spending the high end stuff, but it's and we have a nice filtration system on our water, but I'm sure it's not the right pH probably, but it's have highly filtered stuff. So yeah, but you come to Cornell, you'll see some pretty fancy stuff. So and I love just the smell of the coffee grounds being, the coffee beans being ground up. There's something to that as well.
Yeah. Coach, do you have any daily practices or daily rituals that you do on a regular basis to level up and show up as the strongest version of Rob Koll every day?
Well, I make sure that every day somebody has to tell a new joke, and that's kind of our only tradition we have in the wrestling room. I don't know if we'll continue that at Stanford or not. I make sure I pull my socks up to my knees, because that's the only way you can get true. I just love the scene. I watched the other day when that guy comes out from Vision Quest. The coach comes out of Vision Quest, and it's just a classic where these guys whistle, and he's got his socks pulled up and singlet up with the shirt tucked in. Oh man, I mean, that's my look right there. The guys are going to love me at Stanford when I come out like that.
We
watch Vision. You have to watch Vision. We've all seen Vision Quest, right?
Oh yeah.
I had never seen it since high school. And if you can imagine that movie, I think it came out in 1985, I think it was. And I went to see it with my girlfriend, who's now my wife, by the way. So it was in high school. But I came back from college. And can you imagine a kid that age watching that movie? I mean, I just remember it was like, oh my God, I'm gonna win that state title. But greatest movie of all time.
Yeah.
Other than Step Brothers, of course.
We were kind of bummed out because when we came up, it wasn't, if you would have showed up to wrestling practice with your singlet with the straps pulled over a t-shirt, you would have got laughed out of the wrestling room, where now that is like an actual thing. And that's kind of like our vibe and how we're tights, no shorts kind of guys anyway. So
you got to wear a collared shirt too. You got to make sure.
Yeah, that's next level.
Oh yeah. Do you like the little tree on there? I got the look. I got the look now. So
there you go.
Can't wear that around Cornell too much, but I'm doing it for tonight.
Coach, what are you listening to right now? Music, podcasts, any audiobooks? Are you reading any books?
I have not doing a whole lot of reading right now. I'm on the phone nonstop, so there's not. I read. You know what I read? I read a lot of science journals, and I read scientific magazines. That's what I enjoy. A little bit nerded out when it comes to that. As far as music, I go with a Pandora shuffle. All right, so I might have Christmas music. One of them, I'm a little Bing Crosby. I mean Frank Sinatra. Might little Jason Aldean. I might have might have Eminem. Might have it's an eclectic group of mix of just about every music you could imagine, and it's all mixed up for me by Pandora.
Do you allow music in the wrestling room?
Oh God, yeah, you gotta have music.
Okay, cool. And then last but certainly not least, Coach, this used to have a much more lighthearted feel to it before March of 2020. Now it's kind of taken on a different role or perspective or look. But if ever, when you're not recruiting or traveling across the country, do you ever find yourself late at night on YouTube? Have you ever seen an alien? Do you believe in Bigfoot? Do you have a favorite conspiracy at all? Do you get down that way at all? Or are you just
I do know. I think I do believe UFOs exist. I mean, we got video of it. I don't believe in Bigfoot. I believe there's probably bears or people dressed up in outfits. I don't believe that Bill Gates and George Soros are out to poison us with vaccines. I mean, I think there's easier ways of doing it. And but I got a lot of friends who do, and they're still my friends. So
that's the most important thing.
Yeah, I mean, I make fun of them, they make fun of me. So
And Coach, one last thing kind of came up as we were talking. What do you think, looking back on your career at Cornell, was your greatest success? Was it building the program, getting the team to where it's at, or is it that epic facility that you left them with?
I honestly think that building the Friedman Wrestling Center did more for college wrestling than almost anything that we could have possibly have done. It made it acceptable to spend money on our sport. I don't believe if we hadn't done that, you would see these buildings around today. I think someone had to do it. I think the fact that an Ivy League school did it, that's not a Big Ten. If Iowa builds it, of course Iowa's going to build it. If Penn State builds it, of course it's Iowa, it's Penn State. Yeah, they're going to spend money on these sports. But little Cornell did it. and that guilted the rest of these schools to make it acceptable. And when they built these beautiful buildings, they wanted to make sure that they won, and they make an investment in something, you care more about it. And so then they pay, and all my coaches, my peers better be thanking me for these big raises they've got, because now they're paying more to keep the coaches, and they know, and all of a sudden they're making more money because there's it's certainly not a correlation to having the crowds, but I think that was the single biggest contribution that Cornell wrestling indirectly has made on the sport is the acceptance that it's okay to spend money on wrestling. Because up until that point, there were wrestling rooms in dark, dank basements of old buildings. And,
cafeterias.
Yeah. Now high school, you see it in high schools. So I don't think if we hadn't done it, I don't think that would happen. Maybe it would have happened later, slower, but certainly not as big and as bad as they've become now. And certainly, if you ever see what we've done at Friedman, it's spectacular. It's big time. You walk into that building and you'll feel like you're in a professional football franchise. Nice. For wrestling, of course.
Yeah, we had Shane Van Ness on. He actually made his announcement on our podcast, and he had mentioned how epic the wrestling room was. And when he asked us to guess, I thought he was going to Cornell because he hyped the wrestling up so much. And he's like, "No, I'm going to Penn State." I was like, "Oh, fool me."
Yeah, that one hurt. Sweet kid, good fan, right? And wonderful family.
Yeah.
Coach, will you be scheduling a dual meet with Princeton?
I like Chris. I get along with Chris well. I really do.
No, I know you guys were just sassing each other.
Don't get me wrong. He's a raging ass, but but we do have a dual meet. We're kicking off our travel schedule with Cornell, November 20th.
Okay, right on.
So we're opening up the Friedman Center for Cornell. So that'll be fun. I talk to Mike every day. I talk to the alumni every day. I work out with our athletic director every day. It's like, so it's a good parting. I didn't resign. I actually retired. I officially retired from Cornell.
Nice. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah. Coach, thank you so much for your time tonight. It was an honor and a pleasure to chat with you. Been watching you for years and years, so to pick your brain and to talk to you about going to Stanford, it was a pleasure. So best of luck moving forward, and thanks for all you've done for the sport.
Hey, thanks for having me on, guys. Take care.
Absolutely. Good luck, Coach. Enjoy that coffee out in Palo Alto.
I will. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Good night.
Bye.